Hello again. This is Radio Entrepreneurs. My name is Jeffrey Davis, and for those who just tuned us in, we are at the law firm of Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rogers. That means this is On the Record, our specialty show on the legal community of New England. That means my guest host is Mark Z from Mark Z Legal Staffing. Welcome, Mark.
Jeff, great to be with you. I feel like we're in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like the baseball players, we have the best and the top talent that comes on our show, and I'm very excited about our next guest.
What a setup, huh?
I know,
pressure.
exactly.
Oh, that's Jared Hubbard, of partner at Fitch Law, correct?
Yes, Fitch Law Partners, absolutely.
Wow. Well, welcome, Jared. Tell us about Fitch Law and your specialty.
So it's first of all, it's a pleasure to be here today
Thank you.
and to speak with you. So I'm a lawyer at Fitch Law Partners. I've been there about a year and a half now, and my specialty or my focus area is on international disputes work. So I work there. I handle a lot of international clients, and then I do a lot of international arbitration work as well. In fact, I'm the president of the Boston International Arbitration Council, which is a new organization we've formed to sort of promote the use of international arbitration in Boston and having Boston be a seat for the resolution of international disputes. So that's sort of my focus area, and I'm happy to sort of get into more about what that is and explain it further.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Sure. No, Jared, what's interesting is you've brought international arbitration and very sophisticated litigation to Boston. First of all, congratulations on the Washington Nationals becoming part of the World Series. And you obviously came from two of the top international law firms prior to joining Fitch. What led you to join Fitch and bring this specialty skill set to Boston?
So absolutely. So, and it's actually a family reason. So my ex-wife is from Boston, and we moved up here with our kids. I was at Williams and Connolly. My first sort of job, I clerked for a year on the Fifth Circuit for Judge Clement, which was a fantastic clerkship. I have my LLM in International Law from the University of Edinburgh. And then I went, and my first job was at Williams and Connolly, and my first case actually was a fantastic international arbitration. It was a power plant dispute in Afghanistan with regard to, it was a $300 million power plant that the U.S. government was building in the middle of Kabul. And things did not go right, as they often do not on construction projects, and particularly construction projects in the middle of a war zone.
Correct.
With massive amounts of political pressure to sort of get things done very, very quickly. And so things didn't go right. There was lawsuits brought between the prime contractor and one of the subcontractors. And so we represented one of the subcontractors in a bet the company arbitration. And it was a 2-week arbitration, and we had two British lords were in the room. One was an arbitrator, and one was the owner of our client. And
It's like a movie.
Yeah.
exactly, it really was. And I mean, it was just I sort of
Write a book on
determined,
the case.
right, this is the type of law that I want to practice.
Very cool.
Because it was just so cool. It was dealing with a lot of very cool international issues. We were obviously dealing in a war zone. The guys that go over and build power plants in the middle of war zones are cowboys, and they were great to work with and just very interesting guys. And then so, after doing that case, I really decided I wanted to focus on this issue, on international arbitration. And I did a lot more of that at Williams and Connolly, and then I went over to White and Case, where my focus was almost purely on international arbitration. And there I did a lot of investment arbitration. So investment arbitration is disputes with foreign countries. And so I did a lot of work representing Uzbekistan, and which investors coming into Uzbekistan who things did not go as they had planned, and they would sue the country under some of these bilateral investment treaties, which allow for lawsuits and allow for
Complicated
arbitration.
stuff.
Right.
Very, very complicated, very interesting stuff, and sort of very interesting law to practice. And then for family reasons, as I mentioned, I moved up here to Boston. I actually had my own shop for a little while, and then decided to join with Fitch because my boss, Jonathan Fitch, the founder of the firm, about 10 years ago, sort of got very into arbitration, and I needed a good team to handle some of these larger cases.
Interesting.
And so we have a great practice at the firm, and then international arbitration is big in some of the other cities in the United States. So in New York and in Washington, D.C., it's big. And in Miami, they have a big focus on the Latin American markets. But there was not a huge presence here in Boston, despite the fact that Boston's a truly international city. If you go outside on the street, you can hear different languages every day here. We have scientists and experts from all over the world here in Boston, and we do some of the foremost work in the world, in technology and otherwise. And there really wasn't an organization set up to sort of serve that. A lot of Boston companies, when they have international disputes, they have to go down to New York to find their lawyers and otherwise. And so there are, though, some fantastic practitioners that are here in the city. And so we got together and started to organize. And we're putting together some fantastic programs on international arbitration to help educate the local business community. And it's really important because I've spoken to a lot of general counsel at particularly some of these newer companies in the life sciences space, where the general counsel may not have as much international experience, or the companies are going international for the first time and may not know about this. And one of the big benefits of international arbitration is enforceability, and this is sort of the number one benefit. There's a lot of benefits to arbitration over litigation just generally, but when you're dealing internationally, if you're in Afghanistan, you do not want to go to an Afghan court.
Correct.
If you're in China, if you go to a Chinese court, you're not going to get the same treatment that you would expect in the United States. The head of their Supreme Court recently said, judicial independence is not a thing. This is not something that they value over there. And so you want to be very careful, particularly in certain developing markets, in relying on the local court system or having any of that. And so what you can do is in your contracts and in your dealings overseas, if you put in international arbitration agreements and clauses into your contracts, then there's something called the New York Convention, which was signed, I want to say, back in 1956. About 150 countries are signatories. Basically, anywhere in the world you would want to do business is a signatory to the New York Convention. And what it says is that awards from international arbitration will be enforced by any of the signatory countries. So if you have an arbitration here in Boston, that award is enforceable in China. That award is enforceable in the UK. That award is enforceable throughout much of the world.
That's great.
And so wherever your counterparty has assets, you can go after them. If you're I was recently litigating a case here in the Massachusetts courts where the other side is a multinational corporation, but they had just a forum selection clause that the other side would come here and litigate in a Boston court. But the other side is Chinese. And Boston court decision is not readily enforceable in China. There's only been, in the history of the last 100 years, there's only been 2 U.S. court decisions ever enforced by Chinese courts. Whereas international arbitration arbitral awards are far more frequently enforced. It's about the other way. There's only been 4 or 5 that have not been enforced.
Jared, did you plan for your career to go down this very unique path, or did you fall into it?
I've always been interested in international issues. I think, whenever you're talking sort of politics and international politics, I've always been interested in that. I studied abroad in Edinburgh when I was in college, and then I wanted to go back there when I was in law school. And I went back and had my LLM in international law, discussing, some of these sort of the international law issues are just very, very interesting. When you're talking about sort of how countries get together, the laws of war and some of this public international law, very interesting. And then, the private international law, this sort of the New York Convention and then the ICSID Convention, which is about investor-state disputes, were both entered into in part to make it so that countries could get along more easily and not resort to gunboat diplomacy.
Right.
So back in the 19th century, if a British company and a Chinese company got into it, the British government would send a gunboat and get whatever assets they wanted.
And that's when they could get away with it.
Right.
And they had the power.
They can't do that with China anymore.
Right. They had the power.
Right.
And so countries, they decided this was not a great way of doing things, and that they would, having these sort of disputes resolved by arbitrators was sort of the way to, the best way of resolving these disputes. And international arbitration has a long, long history. It originated with sort of when you're doing business internationally, you would have a trusted third party you would look to sort of decide the dispute, and then people would abide by it. But we now have this international rule system that's grown up around it to support that. And I think it's a fantastic way. If you're doing business internationally, this is the way to do it.
Well, I'm not sure you answered my question, okay? Not that you're not interesting, because you are extremely interesting, and that is, did you actually plan your path this way, or did you fall into it?
I fell into it a little bit. I was always interested in international issues, and I went overseas. But when I was a second-year associate at Williams & Connolly, when I first started after my clerkship, they assigned me to 3 cases. And one was a standard litigation, one was a tax arbitration, and I don't even like paying taxes, let alone litigating about them. But the other one was this power plant dispute, and so it was sort of one of the first cases.
Power plant. Now,
very cool.
I'm gonna interject something. In the 1970s, I read a book called QB7. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not, no.
And it became one of the biggest miniseries of that decade, Queen's Bench 7. And people thought it was a novel by Leon Uris. It was actually a real court case.
Really?
And it was a great miniseries and a great book. I loved it. And when I listen to you, I say, oh my, I hope he's keeping a diary, because he should be a novelist. Do you feel like at times that you should be writing these stories?
I may. One of these days when, the great judges of old, actually, they used to write down their court cases, and then as a retirement package, they would sell the books and sort of go off into retirement. Maybe that'll be my retirement package.
Would you come back and maybe talk about the Afghanistan case, the energy case, and just focus on a case like that?
Sure.
And give us the background so we have stories to tell?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love that.
We'd love to have like 2 or 3 stories from you that you could come back and talk to us about. But before then, because these are short interviews, if someone's looking for you at the firm, how would they find you?
So we're on the internet, and that's probably the best way to find me is email, internet. You can call the firm and
Fitch Law.
Fitch Law Partners. And then, as I also mentioned, we do a lot of work through BIAC to help promote international arbitration here in Boston. And so we have a website for that, BIAC, BIAC.us. And you can join as a member of that. We host some great events that we put together. We're having our first major international...
What's that called again?
BIAC.us. And it's the Boston International Arbitration Council.
Okay.
And we're hosting our first, in February, we're hosting our first international arbitration conference that's going to focus on international arbitration for companies here in Boston. We're looking to get some legislation passed over at Beacon Hill to promote the use of international arbitration here in Massachusetts. And then we also have Charles River Associates is working on a survey of arbitration here to show sort of the economic impact of arbitration and international arbitration in the city.
How wonderful. And again, you didn't give your email, so I'm going to do that. That's jlh@fitchlp.com.
Well, thank you very much.
Wow, great. We're going to have you back again, right?
Excellent. I'd love to.
Great. And again, when you come back again, we'll probably have Mark Z with us again. Thank you, Mark Z.
I hope so, because this has been a very interesting conversation.
I think you need to bring Mark to BIAC.us, the conference in February.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, he's a good one to go. My name is Jeffrey Davis, and right now, hopefully, I don't need an arbitrator, but you never know. We will be returning on Radio